The roses were still in her hair when he told her to leave. Allowance stood frozen in the center of the bridal chamber, her ivory gown pooling around her feet like spilled moonlight. The room smelled of beeswax candles and fresh linen, scents that would forever after make her stomach turn. She could hear the distant laughter of wedding guests still celebrating 3 floors below, oblivious to the catastrophe unfolding above them. "I don't understand." Her voice emerged as barely a whisper, fractured at the edges. "Hadrian, we just exchanged vows. I know what we did." The Duke of Ashworth stood with his back to her, staring out the window at the moonlit gardens where, only 4 hours earlier, he had promised to cherish her until death. His shoulders were rigid beneath his dark wedding coat, his hands clasped behind him with white-knuckled tension. That doesn't change what must happen now. Allowance's fingers trembled as they touched the delicate lace of her bodice, lace his mother had insisted upon, lace that had cost more than her father's entire quarterly income. She had felt like a princess wearing it. Now she felt like a fool. What must happen? She hated the pleading quality creeping into her voice, but she couldn't stop it. "What are you saying?" He turned then, and she almost wished he hadn't. His face, that beautiful, aristocratic face she had dreamed about since their first meeting at the Pemberton Assembly, was carved from ice. No warmth, no tenderness, nothing of the man who had kissed her hand and called her extraordinary just this morning. "A carriage is being prepared," he said, each word precise and devastating. "It will take you to the Dowager Cottage at Willowmere. You'll be comfortable there. You'll want for nothing. Except a husband." The words hung between them like poison. Something flickered in his gray eyes. Pain, perhaps, or regret. But it vanished so quickly, Eowyn wondered if she had imagined it. "The marriage will stand," he continued, his tone flat. "You will retain the title, the allowance, and all the privileges of a duchess. But you will not remain here. You will not share my home, my life, or my bed. Those were never part of our arrangement." Arrangement. The word struck her like a physical blow. She had known, of course, that their union was orchestrated by their families. Her father's desperate need for his debts cleared, his mother's relentless pursuit of a bride who wouldn't ask too many questions. But somewhere between the stolen glances and the whispered conversations and the way he had looked at her during their vows, she had let herself believe it had become something more. She had let herself believe he loved her. Was any of it real? The question escaped before she could trap it. "The courtship, the kindness, and the way you looked at me." "Don't," his jaw tightened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder for whom? Allowance felt something shifting inside her, the first ember of anger piercing through the shock. "You're discarding me on our wedding night, and you're concerned about difficulty?" Hadrian moved toward the door, and she realized with sickening clarity that he was actually leaving. That this conversation, this explanation, this cruelty, it was all she would receive. "The carriage will be ready within the hour," he said without turning. "Mrs. Pemberton will help you gather your things. Hadrian, don't contact me. Don't write. Don't return to Ashworth Hall unless explicitly summoned." His hand rested on the door frame, and she saw his fingers grip the wood hard enough to crack. This is how it must be. Then he was gone. Allowance stood alone in the bridal chamber, surrounded by flowers and candles and all the trappings of a wedding night that would never happen. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. Below, the guests continued their revelry, toasting the happy couple. She didn't cry. The tears would come later, weeks of them, months of them. But in that moment, she was too stunned for grief. She had one thought, and one thought only. Why? What secret could possibly justify this cruelty? What was the Duke of Ashworth hiding? and why, in the final moment before he disappeared, had his hand been shaking. Willowmere was beautiful in the way that prisons could be beautiful. Elegant, comfortable, and utterly suffocating. 3 months had passed since that devastating night. 3 months of manicured gardens and well-stocked libraries, and servants who called her Your Grace with carefully averted eyes. 3 months of silence from the husband who had exiled her before their marriage had truly begun. Alawan had stopped counting the days. It hurt less that way. The Dowager Cottage, a misleading term for a residence larger than most country manors, sat on the western edge of the Ashworth estate, close enough to glimpse the main house on clear days, far enough to feel the rejection with every glance. She had taken to walking the opposite direction, toward the village, where no one knew the full extent of her humiliation. Another letter from your mother, Your Grace? Mrs. Pemberton, the housekeeper who had been assigned to manage Alawan's comfortable exile, held out a silver tray with the morning correspondence. The older woman's expression was carefully neutral, but Alawan had learned to read the pity hidden beneath her professional demeanor. Thank you. Alawan took the letters without looking at them. Her mother's correspondence followed a predictable pattern. Cheerful inquiries about her health, delicate references to her father's improved financial situation, and absolutely no acknowledgement of the scandal quietly brewing beneath society's surface. The Ton whispered. Of course, they always whispered. But Hadrian's grandmother, the formidable Dowager Duchess Octavia, had managed the narrative with terrifying efficiency. The official story claimed that Alawan had taken ill immediately after the ceremony, requiring country air and rest. A delicate constitution, they said. How fortunate the Duke had such a comfortable property for her recovery. No one mentioned that the Duke never visited. No one mentioned that the bride had been seen weeping in the carriage that spirited her away at midnight. No one mentioned anything at all, because the Dowager Duchess had made it exquisitely clear that speculation would not be tolerated. There's another letter as well, Mrs. Pemberton said carefully. From Lady Delphine. Alawan's heart clenched. Delphine was Hadrian's younger sister, the only member of the Vance family who had shown her genuine kindness. They had become close during the courtship, sharing books and secrets and dreams. Delphine had been thrilled about the marriage. She had no idea what her brother had done. I'll read it later. Alawan set the letters aside, unable to face Delphine's warmth when her own heart felt like frozen ground. Is there anything else? Mrs. Pemberton hesitated, a rare occurrence. There is a visitor, Your Grace. He arrived just now, and is waiting in the morning room. Alawan's pulse stuttered. A visitor? Lord Marcellus Thorne. He says he's acquainted with your family. The name struck a chord of memory. Marcellus Thorne, her cousin twice removed, a charming rogue she had met briefly at her debut 3 years ago. He had been kind to her then, complimentary without being improper, amusing without being crude. She had liked him. But why was he here? Did he state his purpose? He mentioned concern for your well-being, Your Grace, given your situation. So the whispers had reached even distant relations. Wonderful. Alawan considered refusing the visit. She had refused everything else. Dinner invitations from curious neighbors, calls from local gentry, even a tentative letter from Hadrian's mother requesting an audience. But something about the prospect of human contact, of a friendly face from her former life, made her chest ache with longing. Show him in, she said, and bring tea. Marcellus Thorne entered the morning room like sunshine breaking through clouds, golden-haired, green-eyed, and grinning with the easy confidence of a man who had never been discarded by anyone. Cousin Alawan. He swept into a dramatic bow. Or should I say, Your Grace, look at you, elevated to Duchess and tucked away in this charming cottage. How wonderfully mysterious. Lord Thorne, She managed a small smile despite herself. I didn't expect to see you. Marcellus, please. We're family. He settled into a chair without waiting for invitation, his long legs stretching out carelessly. And I didn't expect to hear that my favorite cousin had married a duke and promptly vanished from society. Naturally, I had to investigate. There's nothing to investigate. I've been unwell. His green eyes, clever eyes, she noticed now, sharper than his casual manner suggested, studied her face. You look perfectly healthy to me. Pale, perhaps. Thinner than I remember. But not ill. Elauwen's composure cracked slightly. Marcellus, I'm not here to interrogate you. His voice softened, the teasing quality fading. I'm here because I heard whispers, cousin. Troubling whispers. And I wanted to make sure you were all right. What whispers? He leaned forward, suddenly serious. That the Duke of Ashworth married you for reasons that had nothing to do with affection. That he sent you away within hours of the ceremony. That something is very, very wrong with this arrangement. Elauwen's chest constricted. She should deny it. She should maintain the polite fiction that protected everyone involved. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "It's all true." Marcellus's expression hardened into something almost dangerous. Then we have much to discuss, because I've also heard whispers about why. Whispers involving secrets the Duke would kill to protect. Before Elauwen could respond, Mrs. Pemberton appeared in the doorway, her face ashen. Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but there's been a development. What development? The Duke of Ashworth. The housekeeper swallowed hard. He's here. Here. The word detonated in Elauwen's mind like cannon fire. 3 months of absolute silence. No letters, no messages, not even a response to the single desperate note she had sent in her first week, begging to understand. And now, he simply appeared? Where? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The main entrance, Your Grace. He's requesting an audience. Requesting. Not demanding, not insisting, and not commanding, as a duke and husband had every right to do. Requesting, like a supplicant, rather than the master of her fate. Marcellus rose smoothly to his feet, his expression unreadable. Shall I stay? Part of Elauwen wanted to say yes. Wanted a witness, a protector, anyone to stand between her and the man who had broken her heart. But another part, the part that had been asking why for 93 days, knew this conversation must happen alone. Wait in the library, she said. I'll send for you if needed. He hesitated, clearly reluctant, then nodded. I'll be close. After he departed through the side door, Elauwen took a moment to compose herself. She smoothed her lavender morning dress, one of the dozens that had arrived unbidden from London modistes, her husband's silent attempt at appeasement. She tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear. She pressed her palms together until the trembling stopped. Then she lifted her chin and walked to meet her fate. Hadrian stood in the entrance hall like a man approaching the gallows. He looked terrible, dark circles beneath his gray eyes, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, his face gaunt in a way that suggested sleepless nights and untouched meals. He wore riding clothes rather than formal attire, as if he had come directly from his horse without pausing to make himself presentable. He had never looked more human or more like a stranger. Elauwen. Her name emerged rough and ragged from his throat. Thank you for seeing me. Did I have a choice? The barb landed visibly. He flinched, a muscle jumping in his jaw. You always have a choice. I've ensured that at least. How generous. The acidic tone surprised her. She had expected to crumble in his presence, but anger was rising instead. hot and clarifying. You exile me without explanation, ignore my letters, and leave me to rot in this beautiful cage for 3 months. And now you appear expecting. What, exactly? Gratitude? No. He took a step closer, then stopped, as if approaching a wounded animal. I expect nothing. I came to... He broke off, struggling with words she had never seen him lack. I came because I cannot stay away any longer. Cannot? Or choose not to? Cannot. The admission seemed torn from him. I have tried, Elowen. God knows I have tried. I thought if I kept distance, if I protected you from... He stopped again, his hands clenching at his sides. I was wrong. About everything. Protected her from what? The question blazed in her mind, but she refused to ask it. She had spent 3 months desperate for explanations, and now that he stood before her offering fragments, she discovered that her dignity demanded more than scraps. You were wrong, she repeated flatly. That's your explanation? You destroyed me on our wedding night, banished me like a shameful secret, and your justification is that you were wrong? I know it's not enough. You're correct. It isn't. She turned away, unable to look at him any longer. Through the window, she could see the gardens she had walked countless times alone, the path she had memorized while wondering what she had done to deserve such treatment. I have questions, she said quietly. Questions I've been asking since you closed that bedroom door. Why did you marry me if you intended to discard me? Why the elaborate courtship, the kindness, the way you made me believe? Her voice cracked. Why did you make me love you if you never intended to love me back? The silence that followed was suffocating. Then she heard footsteps, not retreating as she expected, but approaching. She felt him stop directly behind her, close enough that she could sense his warmth, his presence, the familiar scent of sandalwood and ink that had once made her feel safe. I did love you. The words were barely audible. I do love you. That was never a deception. She whirled to face him. Then why? His eyes met hers, those gray eyes that had haunted her dreams and her nightmares, and she saw something in them she hadn't expected. Fear. Raw, consuming fear. Because loving you put you in danger. His voice dropped to a whisper. Because someone threatened to destroy you, to destroy everything you love, if I didn't let you go. The ground shifted beneath Elowen's feet. What are you talking about? Who threatened me? Before he could answer, they were interrupted by raised voices from the entrance. Mrs. Pemberton's protests, a deeper voice insisting, then footsteps rapidly approaching. The door burst open to reveal Marcellus, his expression thunderous. Forgive the intrusion, cousin, but I've just received word from London. His green eyes fixed on Hadrian with cold fury. It seems the Duke has neglected to mention that he's been keeping rather dangerous secrets. Secrets that involve your family, your marriage, and a plot that goes far deeper than a simple wedding night rejection. Hadrian's face went white. How did you think Lady Lavinia would stay silent forever? Marcellus cut him off savagely. She's been talking, Your Grace, and what she's saying will ruin you both, unless someone tells your wife the truth. All of it. Right now. Elowen looked between the two men, her cousin vibrating with righteous anger, her husband paralyzed with something that looked like terror, and felt the foundation of everything she thought she understood begin to crumble. Who is Lady Lavinia? She demanded. And what truth? Hadrian closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, she saw resignation settle over his features like a shroud. Lavinia Ashford, he said quietly, is the woman who should have been my wife. The woman my mother chose before she ever met you. And she has spent the last 3 months trying to destroy us both. The clock chimed noon, marking the moment Elowen's exile ended, and the moment her true nightmare began. The name hung in the air like smoke after cannon fire. Lavinia Ashford. Alawan had heard it before, whispered at parties, mentioned in passing during her courtship. The beautiful daughter of Viscount Ashford, once rumored to be the future Duchess of Ashworth. The understanding had been informal but acknowledged, a match of two ancient families that would unite considerable fortunes and satisfy ambitious mothers on both sides. Then Hadrian had met Eloan at the Pemberton Assembly, and everything had changed, or so she had believed. You were engaged to her. It wasn't a question. Not formally. Hadrian's voice was hollow. There was an expectation, cultivated by my mother and hers since childhood. I never proposed. I never made promises. But Lavinia believed she would be your duchess. Eloan finished the sentence with dawning understanding. And then you chose me instead. Yes. Marcellus made a sound of disgust. So this is a tale of a scorned woman's revenge? She threatened your wife because you bruised her pride? It's more complicated than that. Hadrian ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. Lavinia didn't simply make threats. She gathered information, damaging information about Eloan's family, about debts that went beyond what was publicly known, about certain arrangements your father made to cover them. Eloan's blood turned to ice. What arrangements? Hadrian met her eyes with agonizing reluctance. Your father borrowed money from sources outside legitimate banking, sources connected to men who operate in shadows. When those debts came due, he couldn't pay. So he made a different kind of deal, one that involved promising certain favors, certain access, certain— Stop! Eloan held up her hand, her mind reeling. You're saying my father is involved with criminals? I'm saying he was desperate, and desperate men make terrible choices. Hadrian's tone softened slightly. Lavinia discovered this through her own questionable connections. She came to me 3 days before our wedding, with documents, letters, evidence that would destroy your family completely. She said if I married you, she would ensure every salon in London knew the truth. Your father would face prosecution. Your mother would be ruined. Your younger brother's prospects would be finished before they began. The morning room seemed to shrink around Eloan. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. So you married me anyway, she said slowly, piecing together the horrible logic, and then sent me away to protect me from the scandal she would unleash. If you weren't with me, if the marriage appeared to be a failure, she would have no reason to follow through. Hadrian's voice cracked. A discarded bride is already humiliated. What pleasure would there be in destroying her further? I believed that distance would satisfy her, that she would see my misery and consider it sufficient punishment. And did she? Marcellus demanded. The silence that followed was answer enough. She wants more, Eloan realized. That's why you're here. Something has changed. Hadrian nodded, his expression grim. She's grown impatient with my suffering. Last week, she sent word that unless I annul the marriage and propose to her by month's end, she'll release everything. Not just your father's secrets, all of it, including correspondence that implicates me in covering up what I knew. Correspondence you wrote. Forged, but convincingly so. His hands clenched into fists. She's been planning this for months, perhaps years. I underestimated her completely. Eloan absorbed this revelation, turning it over in her mind like a poisoned jewel. Her husband had exiled her to protect her. He had endured 3 months of separation and society's whispered speculation to shield her family from destruction. It was noble in its way, tragically, infuriatingly noble. It was also unforgivable. You made this decision alone, she said quietly. You decided my fate without consulting me. You let me believe I was worthless, unwanted, disposable, all to play the martyr. I know what you were trying to do." She straightened to her full height, something hardening in her chest. "And I know what I'm going to do now." Both men stared at her. "If this woman wants a war," Alawan said, her voice steady as steel, "then she'll have one. But not on her terms. On mine." She turned to Marcellus. "You said you have information, resources, connections of your own." He nodded slowly, a spark of admiration igniting in his green eyes. "Then we fight together." She looked at Hadrian, letting him see the transformation occurring within her, the frightened bride becoming something far more dangerous. "All of us. But understand this, husband. I will not be protected from my own battles. I will not be sheltered or silenced or sent away again. If you want to stand with me, you'll stand beside me. As an equal." His gray eyes searched her face for a long moment. "Agreed," he whispered. "Good." Alawan moved toward the door with newfound purpose. "Then let's begin. Tell me everything about Lady Lavinia Ashford, and everything she's afraid of." To understand what Lavinia threatened to destroy, one must first understand what had been built. Alawan had not always been cynical about love. Once, she had been a girl who pressed flowers and dreamed of grand romance. That girl had walked into the Pemberton Assembly 6 months ago, wearing a borrowed dress and her mother's old pearls, expecting nothing more than an evening of mediocre dancing and watered-down punch. She had not expected him. Hadrian Vance, Duke of Ashworth, had been standing near the tall windows when she entered, half hidden in shadow, as if reluctant to participate in the festivities surrounding him. Alawan had noticed him immediately, not because of his title, which she didn't yet know, but because of his stillness. In a room full of peacocks preening and posturing, he stood like a statue, watching everything with gray eyes that seemed to see too much. Their first conversation had been an accident. She had retreated to the same shadowed corner to escape a persistent suitor with wandering hands, and found herself standing beside the brooding stranger. "Hiding?" His voice had been low, almost amused. "Strategic repositioning," she had countered. "You?" "Contemplating the existential despair of mandatory social functions." She had laughed, actually laughed, surprised by the unexpected wit beneath his serious exterior. He had smiled then, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish, and she had felt the ground shift beneath her feet. They had talked for 2 hours, about books, about philosophy, about the absurdity of society's expectations. He had listened to her opinions, actually listened, not merely waited for his turn to speak. He had asked questions that made her think. He had looked at her like she was fascinating rather than merely decorative. By the time he revealed his identity, she was already half in love. The courtship that followed had been everything she had dreamed of. He sent books instead of flowers, annotated with his thoughts in the margins. He arranged private viewings at galleries and debated art with her for hours. He took her to his family library and let her lose herself among the shelves, never rushing her, never bored by her enthusiasm. "You're different," he had told her one afternoon, watching her examine a rare first edition with reverent hands. "You actually see things. Most people just look." "Most people aren't paying attention," she had replied. "They're too busy performing to actually experience anything." His eyes had darkened with something intense, something that made her pulse quicken. "And you? Do you perform?" "Only when I have to." She had met his gaze boldly. "Right now, I don't have to." The kiss that followed had been her first, soft and questioning and impossibly tender. She had melted into him, and he had held her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. Now, standing in the drawing room of her comfortable prison, Eloan wondered how much of that had been real. All of it. She startled. She hadn't realized she had spoken aloud, hadn't heard Hadrian enter the room where she had retreated to gather her thoughts. He stood in the doorway, still disheveled, still haunted, watching her with desperate intensity. Every moment we shared was real, he continued. Every conversation, every touch, and every word I spoke to you. None of it was pretense. Then how could you do it? The question emerged raw and bleeding. How could you stand in our bridal chamber and speak to me like I was nothing? Like I was an inconvenience to be managed? He crossed the room slowly, stopping an arm's length away, close enough to touch, but respecting the distance she had established, because I had to make you believe it. His voice fractured. If I had shown any weakness, any hesitation, you would have fought. You would have insisted on staying, on facing Lavinia together. And I couldn't. He broke off, struggling. I couldn't risk you. Your family. Everything you love. So, you destroyed me instead. I destroyed myself. The correction was fierce. Every night since, I have lain awake remembering your face when I said those words. Every morning, I have woken, reaching for you, only to find emptiness. I have attended dinners and balls and parliamentary sessions like a ghost, performing duties I no longer care about, because the only thing I care about was taken from me by my own hand. Eloan's eyes burned with unshed tears. She refused to let them fall. You could have told me the truth. We could have faced this together. I was afraid. The admission seemed to cost him everything. Afraid that if I explained, you would insist on confronting Lavinia directly. Afraid that your courage would lead you into a battle you couldn't win. Afraid of... He swallowed hard. I was afraid of being the reason you suffered. Ironic, isn't it? In trying to prevent your pain, I caused far worse. She understood then, with a clarity that cut through her anger. This was not a man who had rejected her out of cruelty or indifference. This was a man who had rejected her out of terror, a terror so profound it had overridden every rational thought, every alternative solution. It didn't excuse what he had done, but it explained it. Your sister Delphine, she said quietly, once told me that the Vance family expresses love through protection, that your father nearly dueled a man who insulted your mother, that your grandfather once bankrupted himself to shield his children from scandal. Hadrian's jaw tightened. We do not have good examples of healthy love. No, she almost smiled despite herself. Apparently, you sacrifice everything and tell no one why. It sounds rather foolish when stated so plainly. It sounds rather tragic. She reached out and touched his hand, the first contact between them since their wedding night. She felt him tremble. I'm still angry, Hadrian. I may be angry for a very long time. But I am beginning to understand that your cruelty was born from love rather than contempt. His fingers curled around hers, holding gently, as if she might shatter. I will spend the rest of my life making this right, he whispered, if you let me. First, we survive. She squeezed his hand once, then released it. Then we discuss what comes after. The drawing room door opened, and Marcellus appeared with a folded paper in his hand. I've just received word from my contacts in London, he announced grimly. Lady Lavinia is hosting a ball 3 weeks from now. Every important name in society will attend, and she's been telling people that the Duke of Ashworth will be making a very special announcement that evening. Hadrian went pale. She's forcing my hand. Which means, Eloan said, something fierce awakening in her chest. We have 3 weeks to destroy her first. 2 days later, Eloan found herself standing before the most terrifying woman in England, the Dowager Duchess. Octavia had summoned them to Ashworth Hall. the main estate, the ancestral seat, the grand house that loomed on the horizon every time Eowyn looked east from her exile cottage. She had dreamed of entering it as a bride, welcomed and celebrated. Instead, she arrived as a reluctant conspirator, walking beside a husband she wasn't sure she had forgiven. The dowager received them in her private sitting room, a space decorated in severe blues and silvers that matched her icy demeanor. At 73, Octavia Vance remained formidable. Silver hair swept into an elaborate style, posture perfect despite her age, eyes sharp enough to flay a person's soul from their body. She did not rise when they entered. "So," she said, her voice crisp as winter frost, "the prodigal bride returns." Eowyn curtsied with precisely correct depth. "Your Grace." "Don't bother with formalities." Octavia waved a dismissive hand. "Sit, both of you. We have much to discuss, and little time for social niceties." They sat on a settee across from her chair, close but not touching. Hadrian's tension radiated beside Eowyn like heat from a furnace. "I assume," Octavia continued, "that my grandson has finally confessed his spectacular idiocy." Hadrian's jaw tightened. "Grandmother, don't interrupt. I taught you better manners than that." Her cold gaze swept to Eowyn. "And I assume you've decided to fight rather than flee." "Yes, Your Grace." "Good." Fleeing would have been tiresome. Octavia settled back in her chair with an expression that might have been satisfaction. "I've been waiting 3 months for one of you to develop a spine. I was beginning to lose hope." Eowyn blinked. "You knew? About Lady Lavinia's threats?" "I know everything that happens in this family." The dowager's tone suggested this should have been obvious. "I also know that my grandson's solution, exile and silence, was perhaps the most foolish response possible. But the Vance men have never been particularly intelligent about matters of the heart. His grandfather once challenged a bishop to a duel over a perceived slight. His father nearly eloped with a French actress before I intervened. Dramatic self-destruction appears to be hereditary." Hadrian made a strangled sound of protest, but Octavia ignored him entirely. "The relevant question," she continued, focusing on Eowyn with unsettling intensity, "is whether you are worthy of the effort required to save this situation." "I beg your pardon. You heard me." Octavia leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "Lavinia Ashford is clever, connected, and utterly ruthless. Defeating her will require more than courage. It will require cunning, social expertise, and the ability to destroy an enemy while smiling sweetly at her across a ballroom. Do you possess these qualities, miss? Forgive me, Your Grace." The correction was deliberately cutting, a reminder that Eowyn's title was precarious. "I don't know," Eowyn answered honestly. "I've never been tested in such a manner." An honest answer. Octavia's eyes narrowed. Better than false bravado, at least. "Tell me, what do you know of Lady Lavinia beyond what my grandson has shared?" Eowyn considered. Marcellus had spent the past 2 days gathering information, sharing what he learned over meals and strategy sessions. "I know she is beautiful and charming in public, but cruel in private. I know she has been obsessed with becoming Duchess of Ashworth since childhood, not for love of Hadrian, but for love of the title. I know she collects secrets like other women collect jewelry, and she uses them without mercy." "All true. What else?" "She has a younger sister, Venetia, who remains unwed at 24, despite considerable beauty. Lady Lavinia has apparently sabotaged 3 potential matches for reasons unclear. She has an estranged aunt who was banished from the family 15 years ago for scandal, and she maintains correspondence with certain gentlemen whose political connections are questionable." Octavia's eyebrow rose fractionally, the closest she came to showing surprise. "You've done your research." "I've had help." Elowin thought of Marcellus, who had worked through the night investigating Lavinia's connections. But I intend to do much more. Indeed. The dowager studied her for a long moment, something calculating in her expression. You have fire, at least. More than I expected from a merchant's granddaughter. The insult landed precisely as intended, a test of Elowin's composure. My grandfather built his fortune through intelligence and determination, she replied calmly. My father squandered much of it through poor judgment. I intend to follow my grandfather's example rather than my father's. A ghost of a smile crossed Octavia's severe features. Well answered. She turned to Hadrian. You chose better than I credited, even if you've handled everything since with incomprehensible stupidity. Thank you, grandmother, Hadrian said dryly. Your support is overwhelming. My support comes with conditions. Octavia rose, moving to a writing desk near the window. She retrieved a leather folio and returned, placing it in Elowin's hands. This contains everything I know about Lavinia Ashford. Her debts. Yes, she has them, despite appearances. Her secrets. There are several she has killed to keep buried. Her weaknesses. Few, but significant. Elowin opened the folio with trembling fingers. Inside were pages of meticulous documentation. Letters, financial records, names and dates, and connections. You've been investigating her, she realized. I've been preparing for war since the day she threatened my family. Octavia's voice turned to iron. Lavinia Ashford made a critical error. She assumed that because I arranged for Hadrian to court her, I valued her. She assumed wrong. I value the Ashworth legacy. I value this family's position. And I will burn anyone to ash who threatens either, including scheming vipers who forget their place. For the first time since arriving at Ashworth Hall, Elowin felt genuine hope. You'll help us? I'll do more than help. I'll lead. Octavia returned to her chair with regal grace. But I require something in exchange. Name it. When this is finished, when Lavinia is destroyed and the family is secure, you will give me an heir within 2 years. The dowager's eyes locked with Elowin's. A legitimate heir to the Ashworth legacy. No more separation, no more exile, no more foolish self-sacrifice. You will be a proper duchess, and you will fulfill your duty to this family. The demand was bold, almost offensive, reducing her marriage to breeding obligations. But Elowin saw the underlying message. Octavia was asking for commitment, a promise that Elowin would stay, would fight, would build a future rather than simply survive the present. She looked at Hadrian, whose expression had become carefully neutral, giving her space to answer on her own terms. If we survive this, Elowin said slowly, and if my husband and I can rebuild what was broken between us, then yes, I will give you your heir. But I will not promise a child to a marriage that remains empty. The heir comes from love, or not at all. Octavia's lips thinned. For a moment, Elowin feared she had pushed too far. Then the dowager laughed, a short, sharp bark of genuine amusement. You remind me of myself at your age, she said, foolish and romantic, and utterly convinced that love matters more than duty. Her expression sobered. I hope you're right. I wasn't, and I've regretted it for 50 years. She stood, signaling the audience was concluded. 3 weeks until Lavinia's ball. We have much to do and little time. She fixed them both with a commanding stare. The War Council meets tomorrow at noon. Bring your cousin. Marcellus, is it? His connections may prove useful. As they departed, Octavia's voice followed them to the door. One more thing. Elowin turned. Lavinia believes she holds all the power because she has your family's secrets. The dowager's smile was sharp as a blade. She has no idea that I hold hers, and mine are far, far worse, The War Council convened in the Ashworth Hall Library, a vast chamber of mahogany and leather that smelled of old paper and older secrets. Elowen sat at the long table between Hadrian and Marcellus, facing the Dowager Duchess across a battlefield of documents and correspondence. 3 days had passed since their initial strategy session. 3 days of investigation, preparation, and something Elowen had not anticipated: healing. It began in small moments. Hadrian bringing her tea without being asked, remembering she preferred it with honey rather than sugar. Their fingers brushing when passing documents, the contact electric despite its brevity, conversations that started as tactical planning and drifted into something more personal, memories of their courtship, confessions of fears, tentative explorations of what remained between them. "The sister is our strongest weapon," Marcellus was saying, spreading a collection of letters across the table. "Venetia Ashford has been systematically sabotaged by Lavinia for years. 3 suitors frightened away with false rumors of madness, scandal, disease. The girl is desperate to escape her sister's shadow. You propose we approach her directly?" Octavia's tone was skeptical. "She's terrified of Lavinia. Everyone is. Terrified people can become brave when given hope." Marcellus tapped a specific letter. "My sources indicate Venetia has been corresponding secretly with a young naval officer, a Lieutenant Thaddeus Crane. The match would be beneath her station but genuine. Lavinia discovered the correspondence and threatened to expose it unless Venetia ended all contact." Elowen leaned forward, studying the elegant handwriting. She's in love with him. Deeply. And she blames her sister for destroying her chance at happiness. Marcellus smiled grimly. Sound familiar? The parallel was not lost on anyone present. "If we could offer Venetia protection," Elowen said slowly, the plan forming in her mind. "Guarantee her marriage to Lieutenant Crane, regardless of Lavinia's interference. She might be willing to share what she knows." "What could she possibly know that we don't already have?" Hadrian asked. "Sisters share secrets." Octavia's voice carried dark weight. "Especially when one believes the other will never speak. Lavinia has spent her entire life confiding in Venetia, using her as a sounding board for schemes, a witness to cruelties. Venetia knows where the bodies are buried, perhaps literally." The implication hung heavy in the air. "We're not suggesting Lavinia has actually killed anyone," Marcellus clarified. "But there are rumors about what happened to her governess 15 years ago. The woman disappeared after threatening to report Lavinia's behavior to their parents. She was never found." Elowen's stomach turned. She had known Lavinia was dangerous, but this was something else entirely. "I'll approach Venetia," she decided. "Woman to woman, victim to victim. She's more likely to trust me than any of you." Hadrian's hand found hers beneath the table, squeezing gently. "It could be dangerous. If Lavinia discovers, then we'll need to be careful." She met his eyes, seeing the fear there. Not fear of the mission, but fear for her. The same fear that had driven him to exile her in the first place. "I won't be reckless, but I won't hide either. Not anymore." Something shifted in his expression. Pride, perhaps, mingled with something deeper. "Together," he said quietly, echoing her demand from days ago. "We do this together." That evening, after the others had retired, Elowen found herself alone with Hadrian in the library. The fire had burned low, casting dancing shadows across the book-lined walls. Outside, rain drummed against the windows, cocooning them in warmth and solitude. "I used to imagine this," Hadrian said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. He sat in a leather armchair near the hearth, watching her browse the shelves. "You, here, surrounded by books. It was one of my favorite fantasies during our courtship. Bringing you home, showing you this collection. watching your face light up. Elowen pulled down a volume of poetry, running her fingers over the worn spine. You thought about our future? Constantly. He rose, moving to stand beside her. I imagined everything. Morning conversations over breakfast, evening walks in the gardens, nights spent. He stopped, his voice catching. Nights spent how? The question emerged before she could censor it, charged with implications. His gray eyes darkened. Reading together by the fire, among other things. The air between them grew thick with unspoken tension. Elowen was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his body, the familiar scent of sandalwood, and the way his breathing had grown uneven. I imagined things too, she admitted, during my exile. Sometimes I would lie awake, wondering what might have been, if that night had gone differently, if you had stayed. What did you imagine? She should deflect, should retreat to safer ground. Instead, she found herself answering honestly. You holding me, telling me everything would be all right, making me believe that I was wanted. Her voice trembled slightly. I imagined not being alone. Hadrian made a sound like something breaking, a low, pained exhale that seemed torn from his chest. You were never unwanted. He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and when she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands. Not for one moment. The night I sent you away, I returned to that empty bridal chamber and wept like a child. I drank myself into unconsciousness because I couldn't bear the memory of your face. I have wanted you every second of every day since, with a desperation that terrifies me. Tears burned in Elowen's eyes. Then why didn't you come sooner? Why did you let 3 months pass? Because I'm a coward. The admission was raw. Because every time I resolved to ride to Willowmere and beg your forgiveness, I convinced myself you were safer without me, better off, happier. I was miserable. I know that now. His thumbs traced gentle paths across her cheekbones. I know I caused you agony when I was trying to spare you pain. I know I failed in every way a husband can fail. And I know, his voice fractured. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. Selfishly, desperately, because the thought of living the rest of my life without you is more than I can bear. She should demand more time, should insist on distance, on careful rebuilding, on proof of his commitment. Instead, she kissed him. It wasn't gentle. 3 months of anger and longing and grief poured into the contact, her hands fisting in his shirt, his fingers sliding into her hair, their mouths meeting with almost violent need. She tasted salt and realized one of them was crying, perhaps both. When they finally broke apart, gasping, his forehead pressed against hers. I love you, he whispered. I have always loved you, and I will spend every day proving it if you give me the chance. Show me, she breathed. Stop telling me, and show me. He kissed her again, softer this time, and the library walls bore witness to promises being remade. They didn't consummate anything. Not yet. Not while so much remained unresolved. But when Elowen finally retired to her chambers, she carried with her something she had lost on her wedding night. Hope. But hope, as she would soon discover, was a fragile thing. The next morning brought a letter bearing Lavinia Ashford's elegant seal, addressed not to Hadrian, but to Elowen herself. My dear Duchess, it read, I understand you've returned from your country retirement. How wonderful. I do hope you'll attend my ball next week. I have such fascinating things to share with London society, including several revelations about your charming family that I'm certain everyone will find most entertaining. Do give my regards to your dear husband. We have so much history together. Yours in anticipation, Lavinia. Allowan's hands trembled as she read the words again. Lavinia knew she had returned, and she was coming for them all. The Pemberton soiree was not Lavinia's ball. It was a preliminary skirmish, a testing of waters before the main engagement. Every significant name in society would attend, making it the perfect venue for Elowen's public reintroduction as the Duchess of Ashworth. She stood before the mirror in her chambers, hardly recognizing the woman staring back. Madame Fontaine, London's most sought-after modiste, had worked miracles in 3 days. The gown was a masterpiece of midnight blue velvet and silver embroidery, cut to emphasize Elowen's figure while remaining impeccably tasteful. Sapphires borrowed from the family collection adorned her throat and ears. Her dark hair was swept into an elaborate arrangement that required 14 pins and Alice's most determined efforts. She looked powerful. She looked like a duchess. She felt like a fraud about to be exposed. "You're stunning." Hadrian appeared in the doorway, resplendent in formal evening wear. The sight of him still affected her, perhaps more now than before, when she understood what they had nearly lost. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "That makes 2 of us." He crossed to stand behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "But we face this together. Whatever happens tonight, you're not alone. What if they see through me? What if I make some terrible mistake? Then we'll survive it." His hand settled on her shoulders, steadying. "The Tun has survived far worse scandals than an imperfect curtsy. What matters is that we present a united front. Let them see a duke who adores his duchess, and half the battle is won." "Does he?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Adore her?" Hadrian turned her gently to face him, his expression fierce with sincerity. "He worships her. He would burn empires for her. He lies awake at night memorizing the sound of her laughter and the way she wrinkles her nose when she's thinking." His voice dropped to a murmur. "He is the luckiest man in England, and he knows it." Allowen's eyes grew wet. Flatterer? Truth-teller? He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Now come. Let's show society what happens when they underestimate the Duchess of Ashworth." The Pemberton residence blazed with light, carriages queuing along the street as London's elite arrived in their finery. Allowen's heart hammered as their carriage rolled to a stop, but Hadrian's hand found hers, anchoring her. "Remember," he murmured, "you belong here, not because of my name, but because of who you are." They descended together, Hadrian tucking her hand into the crook of his elbow with easy possessiveness. The footman announced them with ringing clarity. "His Grace the Duke of Ashworth, and Her Grace the Duchess of Ashworth." Every head in the entrance hall turned. Allowen felt the weight of 100 gazes, curious, judgmental, and calculating. Whispers erupted like fire catching in dry grass. She heard fragments, finally appeared. Country illness. What really happened? Lavinia must be furious. She lifted her chin and smiled. The Pembertons greeted them with excessive warmth, clearly delighted to host such a dramatic social moment. Lady Pemberton's eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement as she welcomed them, already planning what she would tell her friends tomorrow. "Your Grace, you look absolutely radiant," she gushed. "The country air clearly agreed with you." "It had its moments," Allowen replied smoothly, "though nothing compares to London society." They moved into the ballroom, and Allowen spotted Lavinia immediately, a golden-haired vision in crimson silk, surrounded by admirers. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Lavinia's smile sharpened into something predatory, her gaze flickering to Hadrian with possessive assessment before returning to Elowen. "You don't belong here," that look seemed to say. "Everyone knows it." Elowen smiled back, serene as a saint. Try me. The evening unfolded like a carefully choreographed battle. Lavinia made no direct approach. She was too clever for that. But her influence manifested in subtle cuts. Conversations that stopped when Elawan neared, turned backs from certain matrons, a young debutante's poorly concealed giggle about provincial pretenders. Elawan weathered each slight with grace, never allowing her composure to crack. But the real victory came on the dance floor. When Hadrian led her into the first waltz, every eye followed. He held her closer than strictly proper, his attention focused entirely on her, as if the crowded ballroom had ceased to exist. "They're watching," she murmured. "Let them." His grip tightened slightly. "Let them see a man completely besotted with his wife. Let Lavinia see what she'll never have." They moved together with natural grace, the product of lessons during their courtship, and something deeper, an instinctive connection that made anticipating each other effortless. "You're an excellent dancer," she observed. "You're an excellent partner." His gray eyes warmed with affection. "Though I confess, I'm distracted." "By what?" "By wondering when I can properly kiss you again without causing a scandal." Heat flooded her cheeks despite herself. "Hadrian, I've spent 3 months dreaming of kissing you," he continued, voice low and intimate. "Library kisses were a good start, but I have extensive plans for when this evening ends." "How extensive?" "I've written lists." She laughed, actually laughed, surprised and delighted, and saw Lavinia's expression across the room freeze into something ugly. The waltz ended, but the message had been delivered. The Duke of Ashworth was utterly devoted to his wife, and no amount of scheming would change it. Later, while Hadrian was cornered by political acquaintances, Elowen found herself approached by an unexpected figure, a young woman in pale pink silk, her blonde beauty marred by anxious shadows beneath her eyes. "Venetia Ashford." "Your Grace," Venetia said quietly, glancing around nervously. "Might I have a word? Privately?" Elawan's pulse quickened. "Of course." They slipped onto a small balcony overlooking the gardens. The night air was cool against Elawan's heated skin, carrying the scent of roses and distant rain. "I know what my sister is," Venetia said without preamble, her voice trembling. "I know what she's planning, and I know you're trying to stop her. How do you know that? Because I've been watching. Because I've spent my entire life watching Lavinia destroy anyone who threatens her position." Venetia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "She's destroyed me too, in her way. Kept me trapped, isolated, dependent on her mercy." Elawan's heart clenched with sympathy. "The naval officer, Lieutenant Crane." Venetia flinched. "You know about Thaddeus." "I know your sister threatened to expose your correspondence unless you ended contact." Elawan reached out, taking the younger woman's hands. "I also know that you deserve happiness, regardless of what Lavinia wants. No one defies Lavinia and survives. Perhaps no one has tried hard enough." Elawan squeezed gently. "Help us, Venetia. Tell us what you know. In return, I swear on my life that we'll protect you, and will ensure your lieutenant is waiting for you when this is over." Venetia's face crumpled with conflicting emotions, hope, fear, desperate longing. "She keeps records," she whispered finally. "Everything she uses against people, letters, ledgers, evidence of debts and secrets and sins. She stores them in Father's old hunting lodge, 3 miles from the estate. She thinks no one knows. But you know. I followed her once, years ago." Venetia's voice dropped lower. "There are documents there that could destroy her, including proof of what really happened to our governess. Miss Holbrook didn't disappear. Lavinia arranged for her removal." The implication was chilling. "Where exactly is this lodge?" Venetia described the location in detail: hidden paths, locked doors, the schedule when Lavinia visited. Eloan memorized every word. "Thank you," she said when Venetia finished. "You've been incredibly brave." "I'm not brave." Venetia's laugh was bitter. "I'm just tired of being afraid." They returned to the ballroom separately, and Eloan found Hadrian waiting with barely concealed concern. "Where were you?" "I turned around and you'd vanished." "I found our weapon," she interrupted softly. "And I know exactly where Lavinia keeps her secrets." His eyes widened, then narrowed with fierce determination. "Then we end this. Now." The hunting lodge existed precisely where Venetia had described: a stone cottage half swallowed by overgrown forest, 3 miles from the Ashford estate. Eloan, Hadrian, and Marcellus approached at midnight, their horses left with a trusted groom a 1/4 mile back. "This is madness," Marcellus muttered, picking his way through brambles. "Breaking into private property, stealing documents. If we're caught, we won't be caught." Hadrian's voice carried cold certainty. "Lavinia is in London preparing for her ball. The Ashfords are at their townhouse. The lodge is abandoned." Famous last words. Despite the tension, Eloan felt strangely calm. After months of helplessness, of having her fate decided by others, she was finally acting. Whatever happened next, she had chosen this path. The lodge door yielded to Marcellus's lockpicks with surprising ease. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old smoke, moonlight filtering through grimy windows to reveal furniture draped in white sheets. The documents would be hidden somewhere secure, Eloan reasoned, scanning the shadowy interior. A safe, perhaps, or a concealed compartment. They searched methodically, working through each room. The main floor revealed nothing. A sitting area, a small kitchen, a servant's quarters long abandoned. But in the study, behind a hunting tapestry depicting some ancient lord with his hounds, Hadrian found it. A hidden door. "Here." He pressed something in the paneling, and a section of wall swung inward, revealing a cramped chamber lined with shelves. Boxes of documents, ledgers, bundles of correspondence tied with ribbon, a lifetime of blackmail material meticulously organized. "Good God," Marcellus breathed. "She could destroy half of London with this." Eloan moved through the collection with growing horror. Letters detailing affairs, gambling debts, illegitimate children, financial records proving fraud, theft, corruption, medical documents revealing secret illnesses, addictions, treatments for conditions society deemed shameful. And then she found it. A leather folio marked with a single initial. H. Hadrian. Her voice emerged, strangled. "Look at this." Inside were documents relating to her husband, correspondence between Lavinia and various contacts, tracking his movements, investigating his business dealings, monitoring his courtship of Eloan. There were forged letters in his handwriting, ready to be deployed. There were transcripts of private conversations, suggesting she had informants within his own household. But the worst was a letter in Lavinia's own hand, dated 1 week before the wedding. The marriage will proceed as planned. Once she's disposed of, quietly, an accident perhaps, or a sudden illness, he'll be too broken to resist. The grieving widower will turn to familiar comfort. I'll become Duchess within the year, and no one will ever know how thoroughly I orchestrated it all. Eloan's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the paper. "She was planning to kill me," she whispered. "After the wedding. She was going to murder me and—" Hadrian took the letter, his face draining of color as he read. "This is why I sent you away," he said hoarsely. "I didn't know the full extent. I thought it was only blackmail, only threats to your reputation. But some part of me sensed the danger. Sensed that keeping you close would make you a target. You saved my life. I nearly destroyed us both. He pulled her into his arms, holding her fiercely. If I had known, if I had realized what she truly intended, you couldn't have known. Elowen clung to him, processing the horrifying reality. No one could have imagined this level of depravity. We have everything we need, Marcellus interrupted, his voice tight with urgency. This letter alone would see her hanged. We should take what we can carry and leave before... He stopped abruptly. Outside, the sound of approaching hoofbeats shattered the silence. Someone's coming, Elowen breathed. They moved quickly, gathering the most damning documents into satchels. But the hoofbeats were multiplying. Not one rider, but several, converging on the lodge from multiple directions. The back door, Hadrian ordered. Now! They burst into the night air, only to find their escape blocked by mounted figures. Torchlight flickered through the trees, revealing faces Elowen didn't recognize. Hard men, hired muscle, their expressions promising violence. And at their center, riding side saddle in a traveling cloak of deepest black, sat Lavinia Ashford. Leaving so soon? Her voice dripped with poisoned sweetness. But you've only just arrived. How did you know? Elowen demanded, her heart hammering against her ribs. Did you think I trusted my own sister? Lavinia laughed, a musical sound utterly at odds with her monstrous nature. Poor Venetia has been watched for years. The moment she approached you at the Pemberton soiree, I knew. My little bird finally found the courage to sing, and led me straight to you. Venetia is fine, for now. Her usefulness continues, as long as she remains cooperative. Lavinia's smile sharpened. Unlike some people, her guards dismounted, surrounding them with practiced efficiency. Hadrian stepped in front of Elowen, but there were too many. 6 armed men against 2 gentlemen and a lady. You can't murder 3 peers and expect no consequences, Marcellus said, his voice admirably steady. Murder? How crude. Lavinia waved a dismissive hand. I'm simply detaining trespassers who broke into private property and stole valuable documents. Self-defense, really. If they happened to resist and were subdued more vigorously than intended, well, tragic accidents happen. The Dowager Duchess knows where we are, Hadrian said coldly. If you don't return, I'll express appropriate shock and grief, and then I'll marry the heartbroken widower as originally planned. Lavinia's eyes glittered with malice. Really, darling, you've simply moved up my timeline. I should thank you. She nodded to her men. Take them to the cellar, separately. We'll discuss terms in the morning. Strong hands seized Elowen's arms, wrenching her away from Hadrian despite his furious struggles. The last thing she saw before a hood was pulled over her head was her husband being struck across the face, his blood bright in the torchlight. Then darkness swallowed everything. The cellar was cold, damp, and utterly black. Elowen had no idea how much time passed. Hours, certainly, possibly longer. Her wrists were bound behind her back, her shoulders aching from the awkward position. The stone floor leached warmth from her body, leaving her shivering and miserable. But worse than the physical discomfort was the fear. Where was Hadrian? Where was Marcellus? Were they injured? Imprisoned? Dying somewhere nearby while she sat helpless? She had thought herself prepared for battle. She had imagined confrontation, social warfare, verbal sparring in ballrooms. She had not imagined this. Brutal, criminal, deadly. Lavinia wasn't just willing to destroy reputations. She was willing to destroy lives. The door scraped open, and Elowen squinted against the sudden light of a lantern. Lavinia descended the steps with the casual grace of someone entering a drawing room rather than a dungeon. Comfortable? Where is my husband? Alive, for now. Lavinia set the lantern on a crate and crouched before Elowen, studying her with clinical interest. You know, I almost admire you. Most women in your position would be weeping and begging. You're simply waiting. What do you want? What I've always wanted: the title, the position, the power. Lavinia's voice hardened. I was promised the Ashworth Duchy from childhood. My entire life has been shaped toward that single goal. And then you appeared, some nobody from nowhere, and he looked at you like you were the sun itself. You're insane. I'm practical. Lavinia stood, her silk skirts rustling. Hadrian will sign annulment papers. You'll disappear quietly. Accident, illness, unfortunate carriage crash. Within a year, the grieving Duke will remarry, appropriately this time, and order will be restored. He'll never agree. He'll agree to anything if your life depends on it. Lavinia's smile was terrible. That's always been his weakness, you know. That stubborn, romantic devotion. I tried to use it against him once, threatened you to control him. But threatening from a distance lacks impact. Having you physically in my power. She paused thoughtfully. Much more effective. She moved toward the stairs, then turned back. I'll give him until morning to decide. Your life for your marriage. If he refuses, well. Her shrug was elegant and cruel. There are worse things than quick deaths. I'll let you imagine what they might be. The door closed. The darkness returned. And somewhere above, Elawan heard her husband screaming her name. Time blurred into a nightmare of cold and darkness and fear. Elawan drifted in and out of consciousness, her exhausted mind conjuring fragments of memory. Hadrian's face on their wedding day. The library kiss. His voice saying, "I worship her," tangled with visions of Lavinia's smile and the sounds of distant violence. When the door opened again, she barely had strength to lift her head. But it wasn't Lavinia who descended the stairs. It was Hadrian. He looked destroyed, blood caked at his temple, his clothing torn, his face a mask of bruises. But his gray eyes blazed with desperate intensities as he crossed the cellar in 3 strides and fell to his knees before her. "Elawan." His hand shook as they cupped her face, his voice breaking. "God, Elawan." "How?" Her throat was raw, her voice barely audible. "How are you here?" The Dowager. He was already working at her bonds, fingers fumbling with the knots. "She sent men when we didn't return by midnight. Marcellus managed to escape during a guard change, raised the alarm. The ropes fell away, and Elawan gasped as blood rushed back into her hands. Lavinia's men fled when they saw the Ashworth guards approaching. She's gone, vanished into the night. But we'll find her." "She wanted you to sign annulment papers." Elawan's voice cracked. "She threatened—" "I know what she threatened." Hadrian's arms came around her, pulling her against his chest with desperate tenderness. "I would never have signed. Never. Not for any threat, any torture, any price. She would have killed me. She would have tried." His voice turned to flint. "And I would have burned the world to ash to save you. I would have murdered every man between us with my bare hands. I would have—" His voice broke completely, and she felt wetness against her hair. Tears, she realized. The Duke of Ashworth was weeping into her hair in a filthy cellar, clutching her like she might dissolve if he let go. "I'm sorry," he gasped between ragged breaths. "I'm so sorry. For the wedding night, for the exile, for every moment of pain I've caused you. I thought I was protecting you by pushing you away, but all I did was leave you vulnerable to worse danger. If you had died, if she had—" "I didn't die." Elawan pulled back enough to see his face, battered, tear-streaked, and utterly beautiful in his brokenness. "You came for me. I will always come for you." His forehead pressed against hers, their breath mingling. "For the rest of my life, I will always come for you. There is no distance too great, no danger too terrible, and no sacrifice too dear. You are everything, everything, and I will spend every remaining moment proving it. You already have. She kissed him then, gently, mindful of his injuries and hers. But the contact held more meaning than any passionate embrace. It was forgiveness. It was acceptance. It was a promise. When they finally broke apart, Hadrian helped her stand on shaking legs. Can you walk? I'll manage. He kept one arm firmly around her waist as they climbed the stairs, emerging into cool night air that felt like heaven after the cellar's oppression. The hunting lodge was surrounded by Ashworth men on horseback, their torches illuminating the scene with flickering gold. And standing beside one of the horses, wrapped in her signature black cloak, was the Dowager Duchess. Finally, Octavia said, her voice crisp despite the late hour. I was beginning to think I'd have to storm the building myself. Grandmother, Hadrian began. Later. The Dowager's sharp eyes examined Eloan with something that might have been concern. The girl needs warmth, rest, and a physician. Emotional declarations can wait until she's not about to collapse. It was possibly the most caring thing Octavia had ever said. They helped Eloan onto a horse, Hadrian mounting behind her and holding her secure against his chest. As they rode away from the hunting lodge, that place of nightmares, she felt his arms tighten around her. She'll pay, he murmured against her ear. Lavinia, everyone who helped her, they'll all pay. We have the documents, Eloan remembered suddenly. Marcellus was carrying, safe, every damning piece of evidence preserved. His voice grew grimmer. Including the letter about her plans for you. She'll hang Eloan. I'll ensure it. She should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she felt only exhaustion and a profound gratitude for the warmth surrounding her. Hadrian's body, his heartbeat against her back, the simple miracle of being alive. They returned to Ashworth Hall as dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. Eloan was carried to her chambers. Their chambers now, she realized, as Hadrian refused to leave her side, and examined by the family physician, who pronounced her bruised and shaken, but fundamentally sound. Rest, Dr. Aldridge ordered. Several days at minimum. No excitement, no exertion, no distressing conversations. The last instruction was ignored before the doctor finished descending the stairs. You should sleep, Hadrian said, sitting on the edge of the bed, where Eloan lay propped against a mountain of pillows. You've been through. Don't leave. The words emerged, smaller than she intended, betraying fear she hadn't acknowledged until that moment. His expression softened. Without hesitation, he removed his boots and coat and climbed onto the bed beside her, pulling her gently into his arms. I'm not going anywhere, he promised. Tonight or ever. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Outside, birds began their morning chorus. Inside, for the first time in months, Eloan felt truly safe. What happens now? She asked sleepily. Now we rest. Tomorrow, we hunt. Hunt? Lavinia is still out there, but not for long. His arms tightened protectively. She made the mistake of threatening you. She'll learn what that costs. There was something in his voice, cold, predatory, utterly merciless, that should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel protected. I love you, she murmured, consciousness fading. I love you too. His lips pressed against her hair. Sleep, my Duchess. I'll be here when you wake. And for once, completely and absolutely, she believed him. Lavinia's ball was held as scheduled. The woman herself, however, was notably absent. 4 days after the hunting lodge incident, Eloan descended the grand staircase of the Ashford townhouse on Hadrian's arm, entering the ballroom where Lady Lavinia had intended to announce her triumph. The irony was not lost on her. "Quite a turnout," Marcellus observed, materializing beside them. His own injuries had healed to fading bruises, artfully concealed with powder. Everyone came to see what would happen. "Then let's give them something to remember." The ballroom fell silent as they entered. Hundreds of candles illuminated faces frozen in shock, confusion, anticipation. At the far end of the room, Viscount Ashford stood with his wife, their expressions pale and strained. The Dowager Duchess had orchestrated everything with terrifying efficiency. Hadrian led Elowen to the center of the floor, then turned to address the assembled guests. His voice carried effortlessly, honed by years of parliamentary speeches. "I apologize for the unconventional entrance," he began, "but I understand there was to be an important announcement this evening. Given Lady Lavinia's unexpected departure, I thought it only fitting that her guests receive some explanation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Many of you have speculated about my marriage, about why my wife spent several months in the country, about the nature of our relationship, about various rumors Lady Lavinia was kind enough to circulate." His voice turned to iron. "Tonight, you will learn the truth." Over the next 20 minutes, with the Dowager's legal advisors standing by, Hadrian presented the evidence. Letters documenting blackmail, financial records proving extortion, testimony from Venetia, who stood trembling beside her Lieutenant Crane, finally free from her sister's control. And finally, damning above all else, Lavinia's own written plans for Elowen's murder. The room's shock was palpable. Lady Lavinia Ashford fled 3 days ago when her schemes were discovered, Hadrian concluded. She is currently being pursued by the authorities on charges of blackmail, conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, and solicitation of murder. Anyone with information about her whereabouts is encouraged to come forward. He turned to Elowen, extending his hand. "My wife is not a provincial nobody who tricked her way into a title. She is the bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. She faced a monster and survived. She uncovered a conspiracy that threatened dozens of families. She refused to be broken by cruelty or exile or fear." His voice softened, meant for her despite the listening hundreds. "And I am the luckiest man in England to call her mine." He kissed her hand, a gesture both formal and intimate, and the ballroom erupted. Later, Elowen would remember fragments, the flood of congratulations, the tearful embrace from Venetia, the Dowager's single nod of approval worth more than 1,000 words, and Delphine rushing through the crowd to embrace her with fierce joy. She would remember the Ashfords slinking away in disgrace, the whispered promises to share whatever they knew if it meant escaping their daughter's shadow. But mostly, she remembered Hadrian beside her through it all, his hand never leaving hers, his eyes never straying from her face. The war was over. They had won. That night, alone at last in their chambers at Ashworth Hall, Hadrian locked the door and turned to face his wife. "I believe," he said quietly, "we have unfinished business." Elowen's heart accelerated. What business would that be? A wedding night. He crossed to her slowly, deliberately. "We were interrupted, if you recall." "I recall." He stopped before her, close enough to touch, not yet touching. "I sent you away in this room. I said terrible things. I broke your heart and my own in a misguided attempt at protection." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I'd like to replace those memories with better ones, if you'll let me." She answered by rising on her toes and kissing him. This time, nothing interrupted them. 1 year later, Elowen stood in the music room of Ashworth Hall, watching autumn light stream through tall windows as she composed a letter to her mother. "Dearest Mama, the gardens are spectacular this time of year. The dahlias finally bloomed after months of patient cultivation. Hadrian insists they match my eyes, which is ridiculous flattery. But I've stopped correcting him." She paused, smiling at the sounds drifting from elsewhere in the house. Laughter from the drawing room, where Venetia and Thaddeus, married now, thanks to the Ashworth family's intervention, were visiting for the week. The dowager's voice, sharp and imperious, debating something with Marcellus, who had become an unofficial fixture at family gatherings, and somewhere above, the cheerful chaos of a nursery being prepared. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her growing belly. "I have news," she continued writing. "News I've been waiting to share until I was certain. In spring, you will become a grandmother. The physician assures us all is well. Hadrian is already unbearable. Refuses to let me climb stairs unassisted. Insists on accompanying me everywhere. Has ordered the kitchens to prepare whatever I'm craving at any hour. I pretend to be annoyed. I am not." The trial of Lady Lavinia Ashford had concluded 3 months prior. She had been apprehended in Dover, attempting to flee to France with forged papers and a significant portion of her family's remaining wealth. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The verdict swift: transportation for life to the penal colonies. Some had argued for hanging, given the murder conspiracy. But the courts had shown mercy, if banishment to a harsh land on the other side of the world could be called mercy. Alawen had attended the sentencing. She had wanted to face Lavinia one final time, to see the end of the woman who had nearly destroyed her. Lavinia had looked diminished in the dock, her golden beauty faded, her elegant composure cracked, her power entirely stripped away. When the sentence was pronounced, she had screamed, cursed, sworn vengeance on everyone involved. Alawen had felt nothing but relief. As they left the courthouse, Hadrian had taken her hand. "It's over," he said quietly. "Yes." She had looked up at the gray London sky, breathing deeply. "It's finally over." Now, setting aside her letter, Alawen wandered through the house that had become her home. The halls no longer intimidated her. The servants greeted her with genuine warmth. Even the dowager had thawed into something approaching affection. "You've ruined my grandson, you know," Octavia had informed her just last week. "He used to be appropriately dour and serious. Now he smiles constantly. It's most unsettling. My deepest apologies, Your Grace." "Don't be impertinent." But Octavia had almost smiled herself. She found Hadrian in the library. Their library. The room where so much had happened between them. He sat in his favorite chair, reading correspondence. But he looked up the moment she entered, his face transforming with that smile that still made her breath catch. "There you are." He set aside his papers immediately, opening his arms. "I was about to send a search party." "I was writing to my mother." She settled onto his lap, a position that had become habit, despite the dowager's occasional tutting about propriety. Telling her about the baby. His hand found her belly with reverent gentleness, spreading warmth where it touched. "How do you feel?" "Enormous. Tired. Hungry. Unbearably happy." He laughed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "The last one makes everything else worthwhile." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire crackle in the hearth. Outside, the autumn afternoon was fading toward evening, painting the grounds in shades of amber and gold. "I've been thinking," Hadrian said eventually, "about names." "Already? We have months yet." "I know, but—" he hesitated. "If it's a boy, I'd like to name him after my father. Edmund. Would that be perfect?" She touched his face gently. "Edmund Vance, future Duke of Ashworth. It's perfect." "And if it's a girl?" She considered. "What about Hope?" His arms tightened around her. "Hope," he repeated softly. "Yes, I think that's exactly right." Later that evening, after dinner and conversation and the bustle of a house full of guests, Hadrian led Elowin to the grand ballroom. It was empty now, cleaned and polished, but unoccupied, moonlight streaming through tall windows to pool on the marble floor. "What are we doing here?" she asked. "Dancing." He positioned her in his arms, humming softly, a waltz she recognized from the Pemberton soiree, the night she had decided to fight for her marriage. "We never had a proper wedding celebration. No first dance, no toasts, no cake. I intend to remedy that. There's no music. There's us." He began to move, guiding her through the steps with practiced ease. "There was always us. From the moment you laughed at my existential despair at the Pemberton Assembly, there was only ever you." She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat as they swayed together in the moonlight. "Do you remember," she murmured, "the night you sent me away? You stood at the door and told me not to contact you, not to write, not to return. I remember. I wish I could forget. I'm glad you can't." She looked up at him. "Because remembering means we never take this for granted. What we have, what we almost lost, it's precious precisely because we know how easily it could have been destroyed." His gray eyes shimmered with emotion. "When did you become so wise?" "Somewhere between exile and attempted murder, I suspect. Trauma is educational." He laughed, but there were tears in it too. The good kind, the healing kind. They danced until the moon set, until exhaustion claimed them, until they retired to their chambers hand in hand, to sleep wrapped around each other as they did every night. And in the morning, as Elowin woke slowly to sunlight and warmth and the steady presence of the man who had sent her away, then spent a lifetime earning her back, she understood something with perfect clarity. This was what hope felt like. Not the desperate, grasping hope of a woman abandoned on her wedding night. Not the fragile hope of someone too afraid to believe in happiness. This was settled hope. Rooted hope. The hope of someone who had walked through fire and emerged holding the hand of the person she loved. "Good morning, Duchess," Hadrian murmured against her hair. "Good morning, Duke. Any plans for today? I thought I might let you adore me for a few hours, perhaps allow some groveling." He laughed and pulled her closer. "Your wish is my command." Outside their window, the Ashworth Gardens stretched toward a horizon bright with autumn color. Somewhere in the house, guests were stirring, servants preparing breakfast, another day beginning. But here, in this room, in this bed, in these arms, everything Elowin had ever wanted was already hers, and she would never let it go again. "Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist, because you believe in love that fights through darkness to find light, in characters who refuse to surrender to despair, in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Consider subscribing if you'd like more historical romances with emotional depth and genuine character growth. And remember, sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the greatest mistakes. What matters is having the courage to make things right,